What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Valley coming at you with, I'll call it a bonus episode this week. Greg Wissinger of the King's Herald. Follow him at GWIS. That's at GWISS. Back on the pod to talk about the Kings Warriors matchup and why he believes in, areas of concern, but also why the national media at large, including this podcast, might be underestimating the Kings. We didn't bring on guests for every series. That was just way too difficult. Please check out mine and Grant's deep dive. Also, remember to subscribe. If you haven't done that already, hit subscribe on YouTube, subscribe on Apple, Spotify. Help us continue to grow the show. Join our Discord. Link is in the podcast description, as well as the YouTube description. All that jazz. We appreciate word of mouth recommendations and shout outs on Twitter. It's always nice when we can get some positive feedback too, rather than people always just being in our mentions or my DMs and mad or questioning me about something we said. I understand it's part of the gig and I like to be accessible, but it's been a very exhausting couple weeks where the feels like the constant feedback loop is mostly negative. A lot of Discord members are super nice. So shout out to you guys. But yeah, bringing Greg on, Kings and their playoff drought. So I think it's, Sacramento fans definitely deserve this. And I do think that there's just been an overwhelming number of people picking against them in the Warriors series. So I thought it'd be interesting to, one, allow him to come on and shit talk, which he did not take advantage of enough, I don't think. But it was still a fun conversation. But also, two, to get perspective from someone closer to the Kings, what we might be underestimating, why they have a better chance in this series, and just allow, Sacramento Kings fans a chance to just emote over this because it's huge. And we'll bring Greg back if for some reason they continue to make it out of the first round of the playoffs, into the second round, into the conference finals, into the NBA finals, who knows? But it was a fun conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. And yeah, that's it for me. Let's get to this combo with Greg Wissinger from the King's Herald. What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear efforts? I am Dan Pavali coming at you with a Sacramento Kings / Warriors specific pod, but it's really a Kings specific pod. Before we dive into all the shit talking that I think is going to take place, Greg, how are you doing?
The beam is lit. I mean, we're the 3 seed. We got a home court game. We are doing great.
You said that if we want to do any playoff content, that you'd be willing to do it. So you're nice enough to hop on very quickly after that. I think it's important that Kings fans do get to be as bombastic as they please because it's been so long since that they've been to the playoffs. And why I also think relative to every other higher seed, I think the Grizzlies and Nuggets are getting this a little bit, but the Kings feel the most dismissed of any like top 3 seed in the even like top 4 seed in the both conferences in the playoffs this year. And so I think that's also worthy of shit talking as well. And so you're here to just let's take this wherever we go about this Warrior series, about the Kings making the playoffs in general. I will play devil's advocate wherever I see fit, but I've been bracing myself for this all day. And so I'm just excited to see where you take this. So what are just your general thoughts, feelings, emotions heading into not just a playoff berth for the first time in 16 years, but your third? This wasn't like you had to go through the play-in. Like,
Right.
you're third. Like, you're third.
We have home court advantage, which is huge. I mean, game 1 of ending the playoff drought will be at home in Sacramento. I mean, it's an awesome thing. And yeah, we're going to talk our shit just in case all the pundits are right. And this is our only shot at doing it. And we're out in the first round, right? Like, that, of course, is a very real possibility. Like, I get why that narrative exists, but, there's plenty of reasons that Kings fans can still be excited and believe that there's a very real shot to advance past the first round. And, if fluky things happen, maybe even beyond. You never know, right? But yeah, it's just a really exciting, fun time for Kings fans that after all we've been through, we didn't have to deal with the stressful playing because we all kind of assumed like, okay, the league put in this play-in thing and someday we're going to stumble ass backwards into the playoffs and call it a success, right? That we finally managed to be, of 15 teams a top 8, right? Like, it's the lowest of bars to clear and the Kings couldn't do it for so long. And so it's so rewarding that when that streak finally ended, it's actually like legit, unquestionable. Like there's no asterisks behind it or anything weird. It's just no, they're the 3 seed. They've been great all year. They've got a historically great offense. They've got a fun team, a young team. It's also not like when the Grizzlies ended their streak with Jimmy Butler, where it's like, yeah, this is all going to come crashing down next year and everyone
Right.
knows it. Like, this is something that could be sustainable beyond a single year. Like, it's a great time to be a Kings fan, finally.
So of the many questions I have, the first one was, regardless of what you actually feel about this series, were the Warriors a team you would have preferred to avoid in the
Of
first round?
course. Like,
Okay.
I mean, come on. Like, I mean, for multiple reasons. I mean, one, I mean, the two teams are so close in proximity that there's naturally going to be Warriors fans in the building. It happens anytime the Warriors and Kings play, and that happens at Chase Center as well. I mean, there's Kings fans that are going to be there. So that overlap is bound to exist, but you know, you don't really want the opposing team kind of infiltrating and all that. But I mean, round one tickets are a lot more expensive in Sacramento because of demand and kind of the resale prices are through the roof right now. So I think at least in first round, we're not going to see a ton of people coming from the Bay Area. You know, maybe.
Or is it the tech people from the Bay Area inflating those prices?
I think it's more the people who have been starved for 17 years of playoffs. Like, because I mean, you can get game three for like a quarter of the price of game one or two right now. uh, so there's that element, but then there's also the element like, regardless of the final record, I mean, they're the defending champs. It's Steph Curry. We know Clay can go nuclear. Like, I mean, his historic, like the famous, like Clay third quarter, that was against the Kings. So, like, we know as well as anyone how he can suddenly go off. You know, we know that Draymond will get away with absolute murder, both in what he does to the refs and what he does to Sabonis. Like, we know all these things are going to happen. So, it's definitely not the ideal matchup. But nonetheless, in its own way, it's fun because the Kings and Warriors have actually never been in the playoffs in the same season. So not only have they not faced each other, the two franchises have never been good at the same time to where they
That's
were both
wild.
playoff
It's
teams.
the first time all the California teams made it too, was the other thing that I saw.
Yeah, and I mean the Kings are a pretty big part of that, but but yeah, I mean it's one of those things where, is it the matchup I would have picked? Absolutely not. But you know, if the Kings can beat the Warriors in advance, I think it also would do a lot to kind of start to shift some of the narrative around the franchise and shift expectations of what that team is capable of. So, in a way, it could be a blessing in disguise, depending how it goes.
I would think, just because there's not really like an easy series in the West, but I probably subscribe to the notion, unless you're missing a key player, get it out of the way as early as possible. So Andrew Wiggins is just coming back.
Mm-hmm.
Gary Payton II hasn't played a ton. Just
Yeah,
get the Warriors now, and that's probably better than getting them in, a later round.
I would completely agree with that. Yeah, I mean, they've already said that Wiggins is likely to be limited as far as minutes. He hasn't played in a while. I mean, I know he's been saying he's been staying in shape, but you can stay in shape, and that doesn't mean you're in game shape. Everyone,
Especially
you know,
play the Kings, who are just a blur.
yeah, they play fast. Even in their half court sets, they move a lot. They're very fast, and I mean, getting Wiggins back is huge for the Warriors. I'm curious to see, is it 95% of Wiggins? Is it 98%? Is it 80%? Like, I'm curious to see kind of where he's at and how much he influences it. But getting him back is still a big X factor for the series.
I'm also interested in this series. I mentioned this when Grant and I did our preview of like every first round series. For people who think, and I do disagree with this, but they think that NBA offense is just so homogenous now. The Kings and Warriors are like the two that maybe deviate the most in the league based off how they run their sets and all the off ball actions that they're implementing. What do you make of just specifically that chess match? And I'll start on the offensive end. Are people like, what are people discounting where they think, yeah, because the Warriors have Sabonis, because the Warriors have Green, excuse me, that they're going to be able to blow up what the Kings are doing more so than the Kings being able to blow up what the Warriors are doing? What do you just sort of make of that notion, given that, again, a lot of, they're not running like the exact same stuff. There's different personnel
Mm-hmm.
here, but they do kind of subscribe to the same principles a lot of the time, which is not really surprising knowing Mike Brown came from Golden State.
Right. I think that's really the going to be the interesting part is like Steve Kerr and Mike Brown obviously know each other extremely well. Mike Brown was there for like 5 years. And so they are intimately familiar with what each other's going to be trying to do and how each team adjusts and counters and all that is going to be really fun to watch. As far as what the Warriors can do, the part that I don't know if it necessarily concerns me, because I think the Kings offense is so potent that even if it takes a slight step back from where it was in the regular season, it's still going to be a great offense. I'm not really worried about their ability to score. That has rarely been an issue this season. Um, I do think that the Warriors are a smart enough team, an experienced enough team, and a switchable enough team that they can really work on disrupting passing lanes. I mean, that's really been where the Kings have struggled at times this year, is when teams can really disrupt their flow as far as just getting in the passing lanes and, you know, disrupting the dribble handoffs and the things that the Kings like to run. It doesn't necessarily stop them for a full game, but it can disrupt them. It can throw them off. And in a playoff series, you know, that can make the difference of a game or two. So that's what I could see the Warriors disrupting. Now, on the flip side of that, the challenge for the Kings on defense, you know, and they are often a challenged team on defense, is just that, you know, with the Warriors, they go so small so often that it's really easy to, you know, kind of pick on Sabonis or pull him away and negate some of his strengths as far as his defensive rebounding. You know, he's also, I mean, he's not a wing defender. He's not a
Right.
switchable big in that way. So, you know, I wouldn't be surprised if there's times when the Kings, you know, instead of turning to Alex Len, you know, if they go with a more traditional center, they're going with Chimezie Metu, who's a little bit more versatile, a little more switchable, or just go super small and kind of match the Warriors by playing Trey Lyles at the 5, which they've had some success with throughout the year.
The Kings defense is interesting because they finished 25th in points allowed per possession. And you look at the personnel on paper and you're just like, yeah, that tracks. But like they're not without defensive fundamentals. You and I talked about this semi recently. They grab their defensive rebounds. And if you pull Sabonis away from the basket, yeah, that could be an issue. But you know, by also making a ton of shots, you're able to set your defense in the first place. They don't foul a ton. They're among the best teams in the league at forcing opponents to go through their offense deep into the shot clock inside 7 seconds. You look at their shot profile, and on the expected field goal percentage that Cleaning the Glass has, Sacramento ranks 11th, but they finished 27th. So it suggests that there's some unluckiness there. And then I knew of the road versus home splits, but I was digging into it more. They're 11th. And this isn't necessarily like germane to the defensive argument, but they're ninth, in points allowed per possession on the road. I'm investigating opponent shooting percentages. It's not because of like super cold 3-point shooting. They're limiting opponent percentage at the rim better than normal on the road. Is there any explanation behind that? But is the Kings defense, what are you most worried about as it goes up against the Warriors offense? And is there a chance that it's better than the raw numbers suggest, which is you look at it and they were 25th. Like that's not good.
Mm-hmm. The road home split, as far as how they played on defense, has been a thing like the entire year. It's been consistent. It's not like a end of the year fluke or a weird schedule thing or anything. Like it's been consistent, and we cannot make rhyme or reason of it. For whatever reason, they just play a lot better defense on the road. I have no idea why. And the hope is that maybe they can just play a little bit better even at home in a playoff series. And, you know, some of it also, when you break down the defensive stats by quarter, the Kings are a lot better in the fourth quarter. So, you know, there is kind of that question of, you know, how much of it is that they do run such a fast-paced, high-powered offense, even in their half-court sets. You know, how much of it is just their attention and their devotion to that side of the ball, and can they step that up in the playoffs? Now, I'm hesitant to put all my stock in a team ranked 25th in defense, even
Right.
with those good road stats. You know, overall, they're still really bad. I'm hesitant to say, like, well, that team can turn it on. Like that there's some hesitation there on my side, but I do think that they are capable of being a little bit better than what their regular season numbers look like. The other part of it, though, the other thing, just as far as their issues on defense, and you mentioned the shot profile, expected field goal percentage, I think if it's over 82 games and the opponents are consistently hitting that much better than expected, you have to point to the defense. I
That's
don't
fair.
think you can't write it off as luck after that many games. Uh, just from watching pretty much every game this season, what I see as the biggest issue and what leads to those kind of outlier shooting percentages is that the Kings really struggle with stopping penetration from the outside, and then they, kind of collapse to help, and the opponents can swing the ball around, and there's usually an open shooter in the corner. Which I don't know how much you've watched the Warriors this year, but that's a less than ideal thing against the Warriors, in my humble opinion. I think if they let the Warriors shoot open threes from the corner all game, they could be in trouble.
Yeah, and they shouldn't look. The Kings' best form of rim protection in this series might be the fact that the Warriors are averse to getting there in the first place. And so there's
Yeah.
not really, you don't need to overreact in those situations when they do get in the lane. But yeah, you're absolutely right. If that turns into just like, oh, they're gonna need to, whether it's drive or short roll Draymond to kick out, like they need to not uh overreact in those situations. Otherwise, you're gonna be giving up a ton of high quality looks to Dante DiVincenzo or uh against Steph Curry. Obviously, Klay Thompson's been pretty good
Right.
this year. And look, I mentioned Steph Curry, and that's just like an unsolvable quandary for every single team. Who is just like the natural answer would be, okay, well, Davion Mitchell needs to be a Davion Mitchell series. I don't know if there is such a thing as a Davion Mitchell series right now, based on how much I trust him on offense. Who is like how are they going to go about defending Steph Curry? I actually do not think that I saw any of the Warriors Kings games this year, to be honest with you. And so like, I don't even know how many Steph played in for that matter, but like, how are they going to go about defending him? Who's the primary defender? Are they going to try some like anything like hijinksy, go box and one or something against him? What do you expect with that matchup?
So the Kings did have a lot of success this year when they used zone defense. When they
Okay.
went zone, it was actually a very effective defense. They didn't do it a ton, mostly because, and Mike Brown spoke openly about this, that he was concerned that it put them in a bad position for defensive rebounding. And so I don't think that we'll see, just like a traditional 2-3 zone against the Warriors very much, especially, if they've got someone like Looney out there who's a really good offensive rebounder and has a knack for finding loose balls. Uh, a box and one, I wouldn't be surprised to see him throw that at him, but I think we'll see a lot of different looks. I mean, Mike Brown has been a guy who's not afraid to experiment and try things and just kind of see what works. I think Fox has stepped up in a big way defensively this year. It's not that he's ever going to be a shutdown defender, but he's been much better than he's ever been in years past in the NBA. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's times when he's guarding him. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some extended run for Davion Mitchell because he is such a good defender. But I mean, Davion's talked in the past that, I mean, Steph is a really hard defender for him because Davion sometimes gets a little lost off ball and Steph
Yeah.
moves so well off ball. So, I mean, that was something like last offseason, Davion Mitchell was talking about publicly, that it was a challenge for him to guard a guy like Steph, and that was something he had to improve on. Uh, Another big thing I could see him try would just be trying to throw some disruptive length like Kessler Edwards. They acquired him at the trade deadline. He's had some good games. He's had some, played some minutes, but didn't do much games. I think he's a guy who could potentially have a big impact because he does give them more length on the wing and could help counter some of what the Warriors are bringing to the table. But he's also a very inconsistent offensive contributor, which makes it a challenge to play him a lot. So I think the long answer is basically just that they're gonna throw a lot of different a lot of different looks, and at the end of the day, you're hoping to keep him to like 30 instead of 40.
Is there another matchup in this or player on the Warriors, like whether it's an actual head-to-head matchup or just something about the Warriors that you're going to be watching intently during this series?
um, the other big one's going to be Poole, and Poole is kind of an odd one because if you look at this year, he had 2 games against Kings where he did basically nothing, and 2 games where he absolutely went off. And I wouldn't be surprised if the series is the same way, right? Where, I mean, he's kind of that way anyway, where he'll have a quiet game and then he'll go off for 30. Like that's just kind of who he is. But I he's a guy who worries me. He's talented enough, and he's really kind of their biggest depth piece behind their main like core group of guys, right? And the Kings bench has been kind of hit or miss this year. If the Kings bench steps up and plays well, the Kings usually win. Um, if they don't and they let the other team's bench go off, then the Kings usually lose. So a guy like Jordan Poole just coming off the bench is a big threat, I think.
How do we feel about Keegan Murray going into this matchup after this season? This would be your time to talk some shit about Keegan Murray. I know you mentioned to me something about the Rookie of the Year honors in cases that are being made for specific rookies, but not for Keegan.
Oh, just that any argument you make for Jalen Williams being Rookie of the Year is an argument that should actually just be applied to Keegan Murray. If I had a vote, I'd go Paulo Banchero. I think he should be Rookie of the Year. But if you're worried about efficiency, if you're worried about contributing to a team that's winning games, like that's Keegan Murray. He just set the rookie record for most 3-pointers made in the season on high efficiency as the third, fourth, or fifth option in the offense most games. Like he has been phenomenal. I mean, when you look at a rookie coming in and having an immediate impact on a winning team without having to be a focal point, like he's done everything you could ask. I mean, and there's plenty of room for him to continue to improve. I mean, beginning of the season, he was doing nothing but standing around shooting threes. As the season's progressed, Mike Brown's challenged him to do more, like getting more involved with rebounding. His rebounding numbers went up. Get more involved with creating off the dribble. He's doing that. Attacking the rim. He's doing more of that. So, he's got versatility to his game. I worry that Mike Brown might keep him on a little bit of a short leash just because he is a rookie still. But and that's kind of been a trend throughout the season that when things get tight in a game, they really want to win. If Keegan's having an off night, he usually heads to the bench pretty quick. So, but if he's on, I mean, he's capable of giving him a 20, 25 point night easily, so it could be a huge factor. But yeah, I don't think he should win Rookie of the Year, but he should definitely be more in the conversation than he is.
Something else I just thought of when we were talking about the like the Warriors defending the Kings offense is there. So I was about to ask you who your biggest is Keegan Murray, like your biggest X factor for the Kings for the series, or the name that popped in my head who I was going to argue for it might be Kevin Huerter, because I feel like he is someone based off what he can do with the ball in his hands, in addition to just the motion and the actual shooting, gives you alternatives within your offense to where if the Warriors do blow certain things up, you don't have to abandon it entirely, or you're not all of a sudden bereft of these secondary options from a Fox or a Sabonis. And so he might be mine. I thought about Monk too, because I still question the Kings bench. And so you kind of want him to, I know everyone says that depth is overrated in the playoffs, but like you got to go like 6 and 7 deep at least.
Right.
And so I could pick out like, and Keegan Murray could be one. Harrison Barnes could be one for me too. Do you have like a biggest X factor for the Kings?
So, when we think about the starting lineup, it's built around that concept that if option 1 gets blown up, you're fine because you've got options 3, 4, and 5.
Okay.
So, they're built around, Sabonis and Fox, but then they've got Harrison Barnes, Keegan Murray, Kevin Huerter. Any one of those guys could be having an on night and can destroy a team. I think the bigger X factor is Malik Monk, because the bench unit, has not been as consistent, and Malik Monk is part of that. He is not as consistent. Part of what worries me is that he really always wants to hit the home run when the crowd is amped. And the crowd's going to be amped like the entire time in the playoffs. So he's going to do some things. And when it's working, it's spectacular. It's the most fun things you've ever seen. And then when it doesn't work, it's him just like sailing balls into the crowd or launching up ill-advised threes, whatever else. Like it's hard to rein him in when he gets a little too excited. But if he is hitting, not just his shooting, but also his playmaking, his distributing ability, when he's really firing on all cylinders, he completely changes what the bench can be. So I think he's a huge factor. And then, on the bench, it's definitely going to be a tighter rotation. But Trey Lyles has been huge for them. I think that he's going to be a big part of it. And then I mentioned Kessler Edwards earlier. If he can disrupt on defense and have any sort of an impact, a positive impact on the offensive side, that's huge. I mean, that's a big swing for any one game. I mean, the nice thing about the Kings,
go ahead.
Sorry, just the nice thing about the way that the Kings are built this year, both with the starting unit and the bench, is that they're not entirely reliant on one guy having a good night or even 2 guys having a good night. There's so many guys that any one of them is capable of stepping up and really leading the charge on any given night.
Do you have any sense, or would you guess, like, how many minutes that we're going to end up seeing Fox and Sabonis playing? Because while I do think there is some depth to the Kings, and like you mentioned what they've been able to do all season, and then they're staggering. The De'Aaron Fox alone minutes got better as the season progressed. Like, they are still, I'm just curious how their 1 star stretches, is my point, hold up in this series, because that seems like it could be a bigger turning point for them than even the Warriors.
And it's going to be really interesting because Sabonis and Fox, like for any Kings fans who watch their games on a regular basis, like when their breaks are coming.
Mm-hmm.
Mike Brown's been very methodical about, kind of like a couple minutes into the fourth, De'Aaron's going to sit for like 3-4 minutes, and sometimes it feels way too long, and then he comes back in. And so I'm curious to see how he tightens those up, because I do think we'll see them play higher minutes than they did in the regular season. I mean, Sabonis was at 34, Fox was at 33, and they led the team. I mean, they have been careful not to overload anyone with minutes, but in the playoffs, the rotations tighten. You want your stars on the floor more. There's more on the line. I would expect both of those numbers to go up at least a couple of minutes a game, but it's hard to predict Mike Brown. Like he might just stick with what he thinks has worked so far. Who knows?
He's been way more flexible in Sacramento than I remember him being in Cleveland. And so I feel like he will ratchet it up where necessary, would just be my guess. But again, I mean, this is uncharted territory for just the Kings in general. So
Yeah,
that'll be something to watch.
for sure.
This is the cliche question. The biggest reason the Kings win this series would be what?
De'Aaron Fox. I mean, king of the fourth. Like he's gonna. I mean, he's the like far and away the most like clutch player. Clutch moments. He can always get to his shot and converts at a very high clip. I mean, he lives for the big moment, and this is going to be the biggest moments of his career. I mean, if there's ever a guy I have full faith in his ability to step up on a big stage, it's Fox. I mean, he's shown it every time he's been given a chance, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. And if the game is on the line, I fully trust having the ball in his hands. And after all the painful years of being a Kings fan, like that feeling of the game's on the line, it's in his hands, and I'm like, yeah, there's a good chance this ends positively. That's just a magnificent feelings.
They're going to definitely test his decision making in the lane. And I think he's been by and large just awesome doing that this year. And like 30% usage, not even 11% turnover rate. I had him on my second team All NBA, I think is where he ended up. He's been great. Though I do think the Warriors pose just a very good test for him because of Draymond, and Looney even being there, but then also the guys that are going to be in front of him initially, whether that's going to be Wiggins at points, DiVincenzo, or Gary Payton II now playing. And Gary Payton II will put you in hell. Like, and that's
For
just
sure.
like that's a super tough matchup. And so I've said, and this is from someone who's just so far away from the situation, I think everyone often has just said, well, like Domantas Sabonis is their best player. He's been the reason they're here. And I've always framed it as I think he might be their most valuable, but De'Aaron Fox to me is just their best player. And a part of that is the clutch stuff. And then yes, Domas might unlock a lot of what they do. I just don't think it means nearly as much without what it actually unlocks as to what De'Aaron Fox is within that, but then also what he is separate from that, as we've seen. And so I think he's the player on the Kings. I think a lot of maybe basketball sickos are probably more interested in the Domas Draymond Green matchup. I think I'm just more interested in the De'Aaron Fox versus the Golden State defense at large matchup, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's debate even in Kings circles on is Sabonis or Fox better or more important, or which way it goes. And I don't have a clear answer. I mean, obviously the team is built around what Sabonis is able to do as far as distributing the ball, creating space with screens, the passing, and the movement. But I mean, Fox and Sabonis both are on the same page that, like, yeah, they run it mostly through Sabonis, and then they get down to crunch time and it just runs through Fox, and he just picks apart the defense. So it's kind of, I mean, they work very well together in tandem. And you talk about the different looks that the Warriors are going to throw at Fox, and that's definitely a real thing. But it's not like the Kings can't force switches and use Sabonis to give Fox space or get a pesky defender off him. Like there's a lot of different things that they can throw at him, and ways to still create those looks for everyone.
What if you're the Kings, and from an offensive perspective, or even from a in terms of defending the Warriors, and I think my guess would be the answer to this is two different ones. Do you prefer, as the Kings, going up against the Warriors when they have both Kevon Looney and Draymond in the front court, or when they're going to go with just Draymond in the front court? They might slide Poole into the lineup, or DiVincenzo into the lineup, or Gary Payton II into the lineup. Which version of the Warriors do you prefer to go up against? Look, I think pretty clearly on offense, you just rather go up against the too big version of the Warriors, would be my guess. Maybe not. Maybe you feel differently,
Right.
but if you're the Kings offense, do you prefer to go after that version as well, or the smaller version of the Warriors?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the bigger version of the Warriors still isn't very big, and it still plays into the Kings' strengths in a lot of ways because Looney's not going to. I mean, he's a versatile big and does a lot of things very well, and I think in a lot of ways he's kind of underrated. But
Playoff
he's
mode, Kevon Looney is generational. I know this
yeah,
season it
I
feels like
mean,
he just hasn't made his imprint, but playoff mode, Kevon Looney is generational.
right. Like I'm not trying to sell him short or disrespect him or anything like that. I mean, I know he's a big listener of your podcast. I'm sure he's putting this on the bulletin board and all that, but I feel like Sabonis kind of has that matchup. like,
Right.
I feel pretty good about that one. The switching and smaller version, I still feel like Sabonis has that matchup on offense. Like, I don't think the Warriors have a good answer for Sabonis, and Draymond, obviously, one of the best defenders of the generation, and his size rarely holds him back because he is such a smart defender and baits guys into things. He's facing the Kings with playoff refs, so I mean he'll get away with everything. So, there's a lot to be said for using Draymond on Sabonis, but I still think it's one of those things where the Kings will need Sabonis to really just assert himself more than he traditionally has, regardless of what the lineup is, because he should be able to beat whoever they're throwing at him. Whereas, the different looks could throw off some of the other guys more than it should him.
I have more narrative driven questions for you, but is there anything just on the court that we really haven't discussed? Anything, into the weeds that you think we overlooked that you want to hit?
I think we've hit the big, like, actual pretending we're talking about real basketball stuff and not me just like talking some crap. So I think it's a good point for us to go ahead and shift.
This one, I don't know if it's going to give you a good opportunity, but why aren't we making more of the Harrison Barnes going up against the Warriors thing? Is it just because the Kings haven't been in the playoffs in forever, so that's just going to take? It's just like, shouldn't we expect at least one Harrison Barnes revenge game in this, or is it going to be the opposite where he's going to have PTSD and just miss a bunch of corner threes or something?
I think it's the combination of the fact that the Dallas stint happened,
Mm.
and so that really shifted what people thought of Harrison Barnes. And
Which is wild because he
then
doesn't play anything like he does in Dallas with this version of Sacramento. And I also credit to him because I'm pretty sure I dumped on his play for like the first quarter or so for the season, and he ended up being like really solid by the end. But in the
he
games that I saw him
started
play, he was
off
a
so bad.
disaster. Yeah.
He was so bad. Like the first 10 games of the year, we were like, oh God, McNair waited too long to trade Harrison Barnes. He is done. Like he is worthless. Like he was awful to start the year, and he turned around and has been great. Like he's been a crucial piece. And I think it's funny that you know McNair caught a lot of flack over the years for not trading Harrison Barnes because there were all these rumors every year. And a lot of us, myself included, who were like, why aren't the Kings just like getting something for Harrison Barnes and like tanking the rest of the season for a better pit? Like a lot of us were in favor of some of those packages. And you look back at those packages now and you're like, Yeah, Aaron Nesmith probably wasn't a good return for Harrison Barnes. Like, that's probably a good call.
He
That's
did
why
pretty good.
McNair.
If you like offense, maybe not. But he did a pretty good defensive season in Indy. If anybody cares about Aaron Neesmith talk,
Have you seen the Kings? They don't care about defense. We
that's
we
fair enough
need,
too.
but so it's that whole like, okay, maybe there's a reason that that guy's in the chair and not me. But no, I mean Harrison Barnes has been great for the Kings this season. Just veteran presence, reliability. He is a guy who can just kind of still bully and slowly Euro step his way into the paint and get a bucket when you need it. And I think there's going to be some key moments for him in this series. I think it's also just it's been so long since he was with Golden State, that I mean most Warriors fans took a year or two to kind of get on the bandwagon, so they don't even remember that he was there.
Oh, there we are. There it is.
I told you we were shifting gears. uh
Sorry. Go ahead.
no, I wouldn't be surprised if we get a little bit more of the chatter as the series goes on, but it's obviously been a long time. But also, like, part of it's just that Harrison Barnes is like the nicest guy in the world and is not gonna like talk trash or he had
If he
some kind
wouldn't be
of
polite.
like he had some kind of like hurt feelings about the way that things went down with him leaving, but that's all in the past, and he's obviously not the type who carries a grudge.
That's another thing for me, by the way, not related to the Kings. This is a total tangent, but whenever players talk about like LeBron as an example, like getting player X, and you're just like a guy in that locker room who knows that you would be one of the people traded for player X. And it was just like that way with the Warriors and Kevin Durant, where it's like that chatter's existing all year. And they're like, yeah, of course we'd love to play with Kevin Durant. And Harrison Barnes is just sitting there like he's upcoming free agent. Like, yeah, okay. That's so awkward to me, the dynamics of
Yeah.
these players are smart enough to know who it's going to cost you to get so and so.
And I mean it's a credit to Barnes that like he was in the trade rumors with the Kings year after year after year because he's on a nice contract, good contributor, and every year he's in the rumors but didn't end up getting traded, and he never made a fuss about it. Never. I mean, his play dipped a little. I mean, he was still putting up good numbers, but just kind of watching the games, you could tell he was kind of tired of being in a losing situation year over year. But guy's a consummate pro, and I mean, he's a free agent this summer. There's been no talk, but also no drama around a new deal or anything like that. Like he's just kind of playing it out, and we'll see what happens this summer. But like, I'd like for the Kings to be able to keep him, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he's like, this year was nice, but the last few years have been hell, and I gotta go.
Is there any level of the playoff berth that is, or there is, how vindicating is the playoff berth for, I think the comments made, not just about this season's Kings, but I do find, and I'm doing it now, but I'm doing it on purpose. I'm not using it as the crux of my analysis. Everything that's related to Sacramento is almost invariably brought back to the Sabonis Halliburton trade. And while Halliburton's younger, still on his rookie scale, yada, 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 there's so much left to play out. Is there a level of vindication here for that? Because you didn't just backdoor your way into the play-in and maybe the playoffs, but you are, as we said, it's the third seed. I don't care what you say about the West. Like, there's actual separation between like the Kings and a huge chunk of the conference.
It feels so good, like because the Kings have been on the degraded end of so many trades over the years that as a Kings fan you try to talk yourself into like well I mean it could work out because I mean look at this and look at this and look at this, right? And there was a lot of that with the Sabonis trade. It's like, okay, well I mean the guy's been an all-star a couple times, like he's young, like, but there were still very valid concerns like that you gave up all the years of team control for Halliburton, you gave up all of that he could become, all that potential for a guy who it was even debatable if he'd been the best player on Indiana's playoff teams.
And he probably tops out at what he is now, which I would say is third team All NBA, which is not an insult. Like, it's just,
no, it's just, I mean, it would be a surprising leap if he takes a next step to be in that next tier conversation, which is then you're in like MVP conversation,
right.
which I mean, I think some of the totals have him like fifth or sixth in like betting lines and stuff like that, but it's a 3-person race. Like I don't really pay too much attention to who's fifth or sixth in MVP conversation this year. But kind of the the wonderful part of it is that not only has it worked this year, but I kind of mentioned how it's something that could be sustainable, right? Like Sabonis is only 26, Fox is 25, Keegan's 22, Herder's 24, Monk's 24, Davion's 24. Like they have a core of guys who are all in their early to mid 20s, kind of just entering their playing prime, to where if this works and it's good, it could be good for a number of years. And if next season is like this season, there's not really a big concern that Sabonis isn't going to resign. Like he seems very happy here. His family loves where they live. Like, I mean, all the good things are happening, right? Like that was one of the other big concerns at the time of the trade. Like he only had this year, and then one more year under contract. That risk seems very minimal at this point. Like no Kings fans are like panicked that he's going to leave after next season anymore, which I think also changes the dynamic of that trade, because it was a valid concern at that time when he's coming to a 30-win team. That if we hadn't turned it around, if the Kings were still bad, it would be perfectly reasonable for him to walk away. Now, that risk seems very low. The offense is working, and some of that is credit to the offseason moves around, getting shooters around him with, Keegan, Herder, Monk. I mean, that was critical to a Fox and Sabonis pairing working. It was just the trade got graded very much based on what the Kings roster was at the time of the trade, and realistically, I didn't expect them to pull off the turnaround this quick either. So I understand the criticisms, but yeah, it's very vindicating seeing how well it has worked and knowing that it's not just a one and done, that this could be a good thing for years to come, which softens the blow of maybe losing a player like Halliburton and his future.
There's almost, because you mentioned the sustainability factor, to me, evaluating this, the stakes feel higher than they normally would, not in the sense of, oh, the Kings are going to blow it up if they perform poorly, but because this feels so sustainable, where if you had just entered here and a lot of it seemed like a fluke, or maybe some of the players were older, you look at it as just sort of happy to be here, enjoy the moment, kind of like what the Thunder are going through now, but you're old and like it's not going to last. But because it's going to last, do you, or could, like in theory seem sustainable, how much do you balance like actually just being happy to be here and enjoying this versus can we actually use this as a litmus test for where we do stand in the larger Western Conference for then how we flesh out this team around who's already here moving forward?
It's definitely a balance of both. Because, I mean, you look at the Western Conference this year, and it's a weird ass year for the Western Conference. Aki's, our editor in chief at the Kings Herald, made a comment on Twitter the other day that I think is spot on. Like, he's like, my hot take is that next year the Kings are going to end up with more wins and a lower seed than this year. Like,
which I mean, believable, because the West is still like, it's drunk on mediocrity right now. But even I'm using the Lakers as an example. I don't have them winning against the Grizzlies. Like they were 41-29 after they started 2-10. Like that's not, and that was like, they weren't great. And that was with LeBron missing a shit ton of time. The whole D'Lo missed time once he got traded. Anthony Davis missed time. So the West is still, even if it doesn't have the same higher tier level of contenders, it is still just a blood, like the intra-conference bloodbath is still very much there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a weird year, and some of these teams are starting to slip and are going to fall off next year. Some are going to emerge and rise. Like, we would expect Phoenix, right, to have more wins next year than they did this year.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's going to be some balancing that happens probably next year that wasn't there, because this year everyone, like you said, was just kind of cannibalizing each other the entire year. But I think that what this playoffs gives us an opportunity to see, one, Kings fans, even if it's a first round exit, as disappointing as that would be as a 3 seed, we're still going to be thrilled. This was a 100% success of a season, no matter what happens. We are playing with house money at this point in time. And that's a fun feeling because, yeah, I want to beat the Warriors. I'd love to see the second round. If they don't, though, I'm just fine. This is still the best Kings season I've experienced in nearly 2 decades. Like, it's fine. So there's definitely that happy to be here. But at the same time, like, I want to see how far they can go. I also think it's good that they're going to get the chess matches and their weaknesses really highlighted, because that's going to really pinpoint, okay, what do we need to target in the offseason? Because I think that if you hooked him up to a lie detector test, Monty McNair would probably tell you that this team is better than he thought it would be this year too. Like, this team was not the finished product. Like, the fact that it has done this well, it's like anyone can tell you the bench needs some work, but like, the defense needs work. Like, there's things that you need to improve on to be more successful going forward. But playoff basketball is really going to highlight what are the issues and what's just noise. What are the parts that you can build around and focus on, and what are the things that you absolutely have to address?
What is it going to be like? How loud is it going to be on Twitter or social media in general if the Kings win game one?
Block me now. Like, just, I mean, honestly,
Will
even if
will
they
any of
lose,
that
like,
will any of that flame flicker if they lose game one for you, or will you still commit to the just full
oh,
on? Okay, good.
I mean, I found a tweet that I retweeted the other day. It was from 2017, where I was telling one of my friends who writes about the Lakers, I'm like, listen, if the Kings ever win 36 games in a season again, I'm going to be insufferable. So, like, look out. Like, it's like, I am not responsible for anything I say or do this week, like, and through the first round. It is pure joy, and losing will not hamper that, because I've had fun, on basketball Twitter as a Kings fan throughout all of the losing streak. So, like, what's a playoff loss going to do to me? Dampen my
Right.
spirits? No. Like,
Yeah, you can't. You're at the point where you can't be hurt because like you've just seen it all at this point. This is you're like you're on the mountaintop at this moment. If you fall from the mountaintop, who cares?
yeah, I mean, I've died so many times I can no longer be killed. Like,
What is do we have any like what is going to be the go-to shit talking point for the Warriors entering this? Like, is it their road splits? Like, I think people have kind of not dismissed those, but they're like they're game planning for the same opponent. Gary Payton II there now. Wiggins is back. We don't, they went 4-7 on the road over their last 11 games. That's a good sign. Never mind that the only teams to win fewer games on the road this season were Detroit, Houston, and San Antonio, who are all Victor Wembanyama obsessives. But what can you already see? A lot of it obviously is in the moment based off what the game happens or what you're going to see on social media. But what's the shit talking point for the Warriors that we need to be on the watch for?
I mean, it's the same as it's always been. It's just, you know, it's who they have and it's what they've done. I mean, they're very much living in the past instead of worrying about where their future's going. And this could be the last gasp for this franchise. I mean, if they fall to the Kings of all teams, can you imagine what that must do for morale? I mean, it would just be devastating. I feel like the pressure's all on them, even though we're the 3 seed. They're favored in the betting odds. Like, they've got Steph, they've got Clay, they've got Draymond. Like, they should be able to put us away in 4, right? I mean, all the pressure's on them. And if I was a Warriors fan, I just can't imagine how bad I'd feel if I even dropped 1 or 2 games to the Kings. I mean, the lowly Kings of all teams. I mean, come on.
I do agree with you though that the pressure is all on them. And I saw the series prices. I think the Kings are actually favored in game one though, right?
It keeps moving back and forth.
Okay.
It shifted. I think they are now, but
Um, so now would be the time to one, get anything else off your chest that we haven't talked about. And then two, I would like what's your series prediction right now?
so I am predicting Kings in 6, and it's almost surprising to me even that I'm picking the Kings, because where I got to there is that I spent all year waiting for the other shoe to drop on this team, because I've had the rug pulled out from me so many times as a Kings fan that at the end of the day, I feel like if you took away the franchise name, if you put the players, the stats, everything, if you took all of that and put any other logo on this roster and this stats and this matchup, there's no way that even with the Warriors experience, they would be considered the favorite. I just don't think it would happen. And I get it, because it's taken me all year to come around to the fact that I can like buy in and enjoy and kind of count on this team to step up and do what they should do. But that's kind of my hot take, is that people are still blinded by the logo next to the team name And I'm excited for the opportunity for the Kings to start changing that narrative.
This is terrible devil's advocating by me because I
Go for it.
mostly agree with you, but I think it also applies to the Warriors where people are they're not ready to move on from what this, and look, the Warriors won the title last year with basically this
Yeah,
core. So I get the reluctance, and I think I'd feel more impassioned about like, oh, let's not dismiss the Kings. And so I have the Warriors in 7. I think the Kings are built to make this a series. I just have,
you're dead to me.
yeah, I figured. I just have a lot of concerns about how the Warriors feel like they can wear them down on defense and just seem a little bit better built to disrupt Sacramento's offense and vice versa. If it was another team though, if they had like played even the Clippers, especially without Paul George, or if it was the Lakers or the Timberwolves or whatever, I still think the Kings and some of those like Clippers, Lakers, they probably wouldn't have been favorites. And that's just, this team is good. It's not just fun. And I think the people who they are happy to be here because of just like everything, all the shit the franchise has gone through to get here. But the actual talent on this team, when you've watched them, as I have, choppering in throughout the season, like they are good and they have good top end talent. Their offense is just so synchronized, and I'm actually still not sure people generally seem to understand how good De'Aaron Fox is, and so like I'm very excited to see like De'Aaron Fox in high stakes basketball games. So that's what I'm looking forward to. This was fantastic, Greg. Though I'm glad that you were agreed to come on, and I'm excited. I'm thrilled for Kings fan. My advice would be talk your shit. As someone who doesn't like to be shit talked too, because I'm super sensitive, have a very fragile ego, talk your shit. You've earned it, and that's part of what the good natured shit talking makes it fun. And like Kings fans, you guys deserve every bit of this, and so it's exciting to see. And I actually think it probably would have been a compelling matchup regardless, but I really do believe that this is going to be a super compelling like playoff series. I'll be shocked if any of these teams just rips off a 4 or 5 game victory.
Yeah. I mean, Draymond on his podcast was talking about no matter how bad the team is, like it's hard to win 4 in a row against anyone. And I thought that was a really smart move by him to kind of try to temper expectations before they went up against the Kings. So
look, a free shit talking advice is if the Kings do win game 1, you have to start talking about how you're really going to be analyzing that 4-5 matchup. So you know who you prefer the Kings to face in round 2, or no, they get 2-7, excuse me. In that 2-7. So you're really going to want to know who the Kings get to face in round 2. That's got to be your game 1 slant if the Kings win.
we might make that our game 1 preview, is just kind of breaking down who we want to face in the second round.
That's perfect. Greg, are you able to tell everyone where they can find you, the work that you put out / edit, and where they can just find all your shit talking in general?
Yeah, so the biggest thing is kingsherald.com. We're totally
fantastic website. And the stuff that is it Will Griffith? I don't want to get his name wrong.
Yeah.
I follow him on Twitter. That he did after the losses with the charities was I'm just absolutely astounded. That fan base is, you guys will eventually hate me again because I feel like I get I'm friendly with people on social media like you who like grandfather me into like, you know, some of the fan base members follow me and they seem to like me when I'm high on them, but I will invariably have a dissenting opinion from the fan base. They will hate me again, but for now, I'm in their good graces. And the Kings fan base has really been a joy. I mean, I'm also not like Lakers Twitter, so I'm clearly going to feel differently, but it's been a joy to just follow the social media aspect of it. Like that stuff, Kings Herald is fantastic. That was my long-winded way of saying those 5 words.
Well, thank you. Yeah, so we're 100% independent website, kingsherald.com. We have podcasts, we have, you know, previews, commentary, interviews. We have, you know, people in the arena as credentialed reporters. We do a little bit of everything. Can follow us at the Kings Herald on Twitter, and I'm on Twitter at GWISS. And you know, there's some basketball shit talking, and then a whole bunch of other random stuff that it has nothing to do with basketball. So.
Been a little light on the Blink-182 content of late, but I will forgive you.
I'll see what I can do. I'll see what I can do.
This was great, Greg. As you know, maybe we'll be talking again. Next time we would normally talk would typically be the season outlooks, but who knows? Maybe we'll be talking. I'll have to bring you back on when it's the Kings versus whoever in the finals.
Yeah, so I'll talk to you in like, well, no, we should probably do like a round 2 preview, like a week and a half, right?
So 4 games from now, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just I'll keep my schedule open for you.